I sat in the uncomfortable folding chair at the back of the conference room, watching my father gesture dramatically at the presentation screen. The quarterly shareholders meeting for Morrison Family Enterprises had attracted about 40 people: family members, minor investors, and the board of directors. I'd received the invitation 3 weeks ago, forwarded through a generic email chain. No personal note. No acknowledgement that I was family. Just another shareholder notification. My mother sat in the front row, perfectly coiffed as always, nodding along to my father's speech about expansion opportunities. My older brother Derek occupied the seat beside her, looking bored and checking his phone. My sister Catherine whispered to her husband in the row behind them. None of them had noticed me slip in 5 minutes before the meeting started. "We're looking at a tremendous opportunity," Dad continued, clicking to the next slide. "The Riverside property development represents a $15 million investment that will triple our commercial real estate portfolio. We have the vision. We have the expertise. What we need is committed partners who understand business." He paused for effect, scanning the room with that confident smile I'd seen my entire childhood. The smile that said he knew exactly how things would go because they always went his way. "Which brings me to an important announcement," he said. "We're opening partnership opportunities to serious investors only. People with proven business acumen and substantial capital to contribute. This is a family business, but not everyone in the family is cut out for high-level business operations." A few people chuckled. My mother's friend Patricia actually nodded in agreement. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded in my lap. "Now, I know some people might think they're entitled to partnership positions simply because they share the Morrison name," Dad continued. His eyes swept the room but never quite landed on me. "But this company was built on merit, not handouts. We need partners who bring something to the table." My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. I ignored it. My lawyer could wait another 30 minutes. Derek finally looked up from his phone. "Dad's right. We can't have people without business experience trying to make executive decisions. This company is too important." Catherine nodded. "It's about protecting what Grandpa Morrison built. He'd want people who understand corporate strategy involved in major decisions." The irony wasn't lost on me. My grandfather had started this company 43 years ago with a single hardware store. He'd built it through hard work and careful investments, expanding into commercial real estate, property management, and construction supply. He died 8 years ago, leaving the company to my father with instructions in his will that I'd never been allowed to read. I'd been 21 then. Fresh out of college with a business degree that my parents had begrudgingly paid for, expecting me to get some entry-level corporate job and stop bothering them about the family business. Instead, I'd taken a job in a warehouse. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Richard Pemberton, my attorney. I sent him a quick text. "Still in meeting. Stand by." "So let's talk about who's eligible for these partnership opportunities," Dad said, advancing to a new slide. "Current board members, naturally. Investors who've contributed at least $5 million to company operations. And family members who've demonstrated business leadership." He smiled at Derek. "My son Derek has been instrumental in our recent commercial acquisitions. He'll be taking on a partner role immediately." Derek straightened in his chair, looking pleased. "Catherine has shown excellent judgment in property management operations. She'll also receive a partnership position." My sister beamed. "These are the kind of people who deserve a seat at the table," Mom added, turning to address the room. "People who've proven themselves. Not someone who works in a warehouse and calls it a career." A few people glanced around, confused. Patricia leaned over and whispered something to my mother, who nodded. I remained perfectly still. "Jennifer has been with us for 4 years now," Dad continued, and I realized with a jolt that he was talking about me. "She's chosen a very different path from the rest of the family. While we were building this business, she was pursuing other interests. Like manual labor," Derek muttered, loud enough for his section to hear. A few people laughed. "Everyone makes their own choices," Dad said with false generosity. "Jennifer chose simplicity over ambition. That's fine. Not everyone is built for high-pressure business environments. But it does mean she's not qualified to participate in executive-level decisions." My mother turned in her seat to look at me directly for the first time since I'd entered. "Honey, no one's saying you're not part of the family. But you have to understand, business partnerships require expertise you simply don't have. It wouldn't be fair to you or to the company to put you in that position. She'd be completely lost, Catherine agreed. Can you imagine Jennifer trying to evaluate commercial property investments? She doesn't even know what a cap rate is. I bit back a smile. Catherine had asked me to explain cap rates to her just 5 years ago when she joined the company. I'd patiently walked her through the formula. Net operating income divided by property value. She'd written it down on a napkin at Thanksgiving dinner. This isn't personal, Dad said, addressing the room again. It's business. And in business, you need people who understand finance, strategy, and market dynamics. People who've proven they can operate at this level. Robert's absolutely right, said one of the board members, Greg Patterson, who'd been with the company for 15 years. We can't let sentiment interfere with sound business practices. Partnership positions should go to qualified individuals. People who actually contribute to the company's success, added another board member, Sarah Chen. Not people who've chosen to work outside the organization. I checked my watch. 23 minutes into the meeting. Richard would be getting impatient. So here's what we're proposing, Dad said, pulling up a document on the screen. Partnership shares will be distributed based on current involvement and future capital contributions. Derek will receive 12%. Catherine will receive 9%. Patricia's investment group will receive 8%. He went through the entire list. Board members, long-term investors, family friends who'd contributed capital over the years. My name never appeared. This represents a total of 47% of partnership shares, Dad concluded. Combined with my existing 43% ownership, this gives us 90% total. The remaining 10% will be held in reserve for future strategic partners. What about the existing shareholders? Someone asked from the middle of the room. Existing minority shareholders retain their current positions, Dad said smoothly. This partnership structure operates at a different level. These are the people making executive decisions and committing substantial capital for expansion. And Jennifer? Patricia asked, glancing back at me with barely concealed pity. Is she retaining her minor shares? Jennifer has a small shareholding from Grandpa Morrison's estate, Mom explained. Less than 1%. She'll continue to receive her small dividends, but she won't be involved in partnership decisions. It's really for the best. She can focus on her warehouse work without the stress of business operations. Derek snorted. Yeah, I'm sure the warehouse is super stressful. Moving boxes all day. Derek, Mom said, but she was smiling. I took a slow breath. In through my nose, out through my mouth. The technique I'd learned in business school during high-pressure negotiations. Stay calm. Stay focused. Wait for the right moment. Are there any questions? Dad asked, looking around the room with satisfaction. I raised my hand. Dad blinked, seeming to register my presence fully for the first time. Jennifer. I didn't realize you were here. I'm a shareholder, I said calmly. I was notified about the meeting. Of course, of course. He smiled that condescending smile. Do you have a question about the partnership structure? I know some of the financial terms might be confusing. I have a statement, I said. The room grew quieter. A few people shifted in their seats. A statement. Dad repeated. Yes. I stood up, smoothing down my warehouse uniform shirt. I'd come directly from work, not bothering to change. Let them see exactly what they expected to see. I'd like to address the partnership proposal. Mom turned fully around now, her expression caught between embarrassment and irritation. Honey, this really isn't the appropriate venue. If you have concerns about your minor shareholding, we can discuss it privately. I'm fine with discussing it here, I said. At a shareholders' meeting, where shareholding decisions are made. Dad's smile tightened slightly. Jennifer, I appreciate your interest, but as I explained, the partnership structure is for qualified business leaders. You're certainly welcome to maintain your small shareholding, but partnership decisions. I'd like to call my attorney, I said. The room went completely silent. Your attorney? Derek laughed. You have an attorney? I do. I pulled out my phone and sent the text to Richard. Come in now. Jennifer, this is highly irregular, Dad said, his voice taking on an edge. This is a family meeting. It's a shareholders meeting, I corrected gently. According to the bylaws, any shareholder has the right to legal representation at official company meetings. I checked. The conference room door opened. Richard Pemberton walked in, immaculate in his charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. At 62, he commanded attention without saying a word, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and radiating the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years practicing corporate law. "What is this?" Mom demanded. "Good afternoon," Richard said pleasantly. "Richard Pemberton, Pemberton and Associates. I represent Ms. Jennifer Morrison in all matters related to Morrison Family Enterprises." Dad stared. "You hired Richard Pemberton? How do you even afford?" "Mr. Morrison," Richard interrupted smoothly, "I've been Ms. Morrison's attorney for 7 years. We have an excellent working relationship." 7 years. Since 6 months after Grandpa died. Since I'd started making the moves that had led to this moment. "This is ridiculous," Derek said. "Jennifer can't afford Richard Pemberton. He charges like $1,000 an hour." $1,500, Richard corrected. "And Ms. Morrison's account is always current." Catherine frowned. "How can you possibly? Warehouse jobs don't pay." "I believe we're getting off track," Richard said. He set his briefcase on the table and opened it with a precise click. "Mr. Morrison, you've presented a partnership structure that allocates 90% of partnership shares to various parties. Is that correct?" "That's right," Dad said slowly. "But I don't see what." "And this structure assumes you currently hold 43% ownership of Morrison Family Enterprises?" "I do hold 43%. I inherited it from my father and I've been running this company." "Actually," Richard said, pulling out a folder, "you hold 0%. The silence that followed was absolute. "That's impossible," Dad said. "I own this company. My father left it to me." "Your father left you operational control," Richard said. "Which is different from ownership. The company structure established by Morrison Sr. was quite complex. He created a trust mechanism that allowed for ownership transfers independent of operational management." He pulled out several documents, laying them across the table. "Over the past 7 years, Ms. Morrison has systematically acquired ownership shares in Morrison Family Enterprises through a series of private transactions with existing shareholders." "What?" Mom's voice was faint. "Ms. Morrison began by purchasing small shares from minor investors," Richard continued. 5% here, 3% there. She paid fair market value, sometimes above market value, for shares that most holders considered minor investments. Over time, these acquisitions added up. He produced another document. 3 years ago, she purchased a substantial block, 18%, from the Patterson Family Trust during their estate liquidation. Greg Patterson went pale. "That was handled through a private equity firm." "Mountain View Capital Holdings," Richard confirmed. "Ms. Morrison's investment company." The transaction was entirely legal and properly documented. The Patterson Family Trust was fully aware they were selling to a Morrison family member. "They chose not to disclose this to you, Mr. Morrison." "This can't be legal," Dad said, but his voice was shaking. "It's completely legal," Richard said. "Ms. Morrison also acquired 12% from the Henderson Holdings Group 2 years ago, 9% from Chin Investments last year, and numerous smaller blocks from various shareholders who were happy to liquidate their positions at premium prices." He looked directly at my father. "In total, Ms. Morrison currently owns 67% of Morrison Family Enterprises." The room exploded. 67%? Derek shouted. "That's impossible. She works in a warehouse." Catherine protested. "How could she afford?" Mom started. Silence. Dad's voice cracked like thunder. Everyone froze. He stood there, breathing hard, staring at Richard. "You're lying. This is some kind of fraud. Jennifer doesn't have that kind of money. She can't have bought out the company." "Ms. Morrison has substantial personal wealth," Richard said calmly. "She's been investing since she was 22. She started with her inheritance from her grandmother, not the Morrison grandmother, but her maternal grandmother, whose estate of $800,000 was left to Jennifer when she was 21. I remembered that inheritance. My parents had suggested I put it in a safe savings account. Instead, I'd met with financial advisors. Real ones. who'd helped me understand compound growth and strategic investing. 800,000 doesn't become millions, Derek said desperately. No, Richard agreed. But 800,000 invested wisely in a rising tech market in 2016 can grow substantially. Ms. Morrison made several early investments in emerging technology companies. She invested in a small cloud computing startup that was later acquired by Microsoft. She bought shares in an AI development company that went public in 2019. She diversified into real estate investment trusts and high-growth mutual funds. He smiled slightly. By 2020, her 800,000 had become approximately 12 million. She continued investing. By 2023, she had 47 million. Currently, her portfolio exceeds 93 million. The silence was deafening. That's not possible, Mom whispered. I have the documentation, Richard said. Bank statements, investment account summaries, transaction records. All available for review if needed. Ms. Morrison has been extraordinarily successful in her investment career. The warehouse job she maintains is actually her choice. She owns the warehouse facility and 3 others in the region. She finds the hands-on work satisfying. I own the warehouses. That detail hit everyone like a second bomb. You own, Dad started then stopped. 4 warehouse facilities, I confirmed, speaking for the first time since Richard had entered. I purchased the first one 5 years ago. It's a solid investment, commercial real estate with built-in tenants and steady cash flow. The company that hired me to work there doesn't know I own the building. I prefer it that way. I like the work. This is insane, Derek said. You're telling me Jennifer is some secret millionaire? 93 million would typically be described as multimillionaire status, Richard said. Though much of that is currently invested in Morrison family enterprises. Ms. Morrison has spent approximately 68 million over 7 years acquiring 67% ownership of this company. Dad sank into his chair. Why? I looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time in years. Because Grandpa Morrison left me a letter. A letter. Mom said faintly. In his will he left me a sealed envelope. You probably don't remember. There was a lot happening at the funeral. His lawyer gave it to me privately. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of the letter, yellowed paper with my grandfather's handwriting. He told me he was leaving you operational control of the company, Dad. But he wanted me to know something. I read from the photo. Jennifer, you have a better head for business than anyone else in this family. I'm leaving your father in charge because he expects it and I hope he'll rise to the challenge. But I'm trusting you to watch over what I've built. If they ever try to cut you out, if they ever dismiss you, remember, in business ownership matters more than titles. You'll know what to do. Tears pricked my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. He left me instructions for accessing all the minority shareholders. He told me which ones might sell and when. He gave me the roadmap to take control if I ever needed to. Dad wouldn't do that, Derek said, but he sounded uncertain. Your grandfather was a brilliant businessman, Richard said. He understood family dynamics. He hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but he prepared for the possibility that Ms. Morrison might need protection. So all this time, Catherine started. All this time I've been buying shares, I said simply. Every time I had investment returns, I put them back into acquiring more of this company. I worked in the warehouse because I wanted to understand ground-level operations. I stayed quiet at family dinners when you talked about the business because I was learning everything you were doing. And now. Dad's voice was hollow. Now, Richard said, we need to address the partnership structure you proposed. Because with 67% ownership, Ms. Morrison has controlling interest in this company. Any major business decisions require her approval. This is my company, Dad said, but the words had no force behind them. This is Ms. Morrison's company, Richard corrected gently. You manage it. She owns it. There's a significant difference. Mom stood up suddenly. We'll contest this. There must be some legal basis. There isn't, Richard said. Every transaction was legal, properly documented, and conducted at fair market value or above. Many shareholders sold to Ms. Morrison specifically because she offered them more than their shares were worth on the open market. She paid a premium to acquire controlling interest. That's standard corporate acquisition practice. We're family. Mom's voice rose. You can't just take over the family business. I didn't take it over, I said quietly. I bought it, legally, from people who wanted to sell. Just like any other business transaction. Greg Patterson cleared his throat. Jennifer, I want you to know, the Patterson Family Trust sold those shares because we needed liquidity for estate taxes. You offered us a fair price and we were grateful. We had no idea you were being excluded from the business, or we might have said something. I appreciate that, Greg, I said. And I want to be clear, he continued, looking at my father, that I consider Ms. Morrison a more than qualified owner. Her investment track record speaks for itself. Sarah Chin nodded slowly. If Jennifer owns 67%, she has every right to restructure the partnership program. Or cancel it entirely. Cancel it. Derek looked panicked. But Dad said I'd be getting 12%. Derek, I said, and my voice was colder than I'd intended. You laughed about my warehouse job. Multiple times. Today and at family dinners. You've spent years treating me like I was too stupid to understand business. Did you ever once ask what I actually did? He opened his mouth, then closed it. And Catherine, I continued, you've been handling property management for 4 years. Did you know I own 7 commercial properties outside this company? Did you ever wonder how I afforded to live alone in a nice apartment on a warehouse salary? She shook her head mutely. Mom. Dad. I looked at my parents. You assumed the worst about me. You assumed I failed. You never asked questions. You just decided I wasn't worth including. We thought, Mom started. You thought I was simple, I said. You thought I took the easy path. You never considered that I might be building something you couldn't see. Dad's hands were shaking. So what happens now? You fire me? Take over the company? I glanced at Richard, who nodded slightly. Here's what's going to happen, I said. The partnership structure you proposed is cancelled. There will be no partnership shares distributed without my approval as majority owner. Derek made a small, despairing sound. However, I continued, I'm not interested in day-to-day management. I like my work. I like my life. So Dad, you'll continue as CEO but with conditions. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. First, all major business decisions, anything over $5 million, requires my approval. Second, Derek and Catherine, you'll continue in your current roles, but you'll report to a new COO who actually understands operations. I'm hiring someone from outside the family. You can't, Derek started. I can, I said simply. I own 67%. I can do whatever I want with this company. Be grateful I'm leaving you employed. Third, I said, looking at my mother, there will be no more family meetings where my role in this company is discussed without me present. If there are shareholder meetings, I expect to be notified as the primary shareholder. No more generic emails. Mom nodded slowly, looking dazed. Fourth, the Riverside property development that Dad mentioned? It's approved, but I'll be reviewing all contracts personally. Richard will handle the legal oversight. We're not moving forward on $15 million without proper due diligence. I've been planning that project for months, Dad protested. And now you'll plan it with proper oversight, I said. Which is how businesses should run. Is there a fifth condition? Patricia asked quietly. Yes. I looked around the room at all the shocked faces. Everyone in this room will sign a non-disclosure agreement about the ownership structure. I don't want this becoming public gossip. The official story is that I've been a silent investor for years, and we're now formalizing my role. No one discusses my personal finances. No one talks about how the family treated me. We move forward professionally. And if we don't sign? Derek asked defiantly. Then I restructure the entire company, starting with terminating every family member's employment and hiring a completely new management team, I said calmly. I'd prefer not to do that because despite everything you are actually decent at your jobs. But I will if I have to. The fight went out of him. Richard, can you distribute the NDAs? I asked. He pulled out a stack of documents from his briefcase. Already prepared. Everyone who wishes to remain involved with Morrison Family Enterprises will need to sign before leaving today. People began signing. One by one. The board members. The investors. My family. When my father signed, his hand was still shaking. He looked up at me. I really believed you were just simple. Content with less. I know, I said. Your grandfather really left you that letter? He really did. I showed him the actual letter, pulling it from my jacket pocket. He knew you'd need someone watching. He trusted me to do it. Dad's eyes filled with tears as he read Grandpa's handwriting. He was right. You're better at this than any of us. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. The warehouse job, Mom said suddenly. Do you really like it? I really do, I said. It's honest work. Keeps me grounded. And it's satisfying to build something with your hands. You should try it sometime. She almost smiled. Almost. As people filed out, signing their NDAs and avoiding eye contact, Richard packed up his briefcase. Well executed, he said quietly. Your grandfather would be proud. Thanks for being here, I said. That's what you pay me for. He smiled. Though I have to say, the look on their faces when I said 67%, that might have been the highlight of my legal career. After everyone left, I stood alone in the conference room, looking at the presentation screen still showing Dad's partnership distribution plan. All those percentages. All that confidence. All that assumption that I didn't matter. My phone buzzed. A text from my warehouse supervisor. You coming back for the afternoon shift? I smiled and texted back. On my way. I had boxes to move. A business to run from the shadows. And a family that would never underestimate me again. The warehouse was honest. The warehouse was real. And now, the warehouse was owned by someone who controlled 67% of a multi-million-dollar family enterprise. Grandpa Morrison had taught me that business wasn't about titles or recognition. It was about ownership. About making smart moves when no one was watching. About building something real. I'd learned that lesson well. As I drove back to the warehouse, still in my work uniform, I thought about the looks on their faces. The disbelief. The slow, dawning realization that they'd completely misjudged me. Tomorrow things would be different. Tomorrow I'd receive respect. Tomorrow they'd include me. But today I'd move boxes. I'd do the work I enjoyed. I'd be exactly who I'd always been. Just with 67% controlling interest in the family business. I pulled into the warehouse parking lot, checked my reflection in the mirror and smiled. Sometimes the best power is the power no one knows you have. Until the moment they need to know. And in that conference room today, they'd learned exactly how much power I'd been holding all along.